Harry's Wife, Part 101.66. Unimportant, Misguided, Disloyal. Looks like there's trouble ahead if those words are being used to describe the gruesome twosome. Let's find out by utilising another journalistic news source, the veracity of which, of course, I leave to you to decide as to whether you accept it or not. I will provide you with the analysis. We turn to an article from the Daily Beast, written by Tom Sykes, which tells us Prince Harry will be permanently exiled by ruthless King Charles, sources say. A palace source said Edward VIII and Wallis Simpson were the blueprint, so Harry and Harry's wife come to be seen as unimportant, misguided, disloyal, and even treacherous individuals. Prince Harry faces a life of permanent exile, with King Charles plotting to follow the playbook drawn up by the royals as they overcame the crisis triggered by Edward VIII, the king who abdicated in 1936, and was obliged to live the rest of his life outside the United Kingdom, the Daily Beast understands. A friend of the king's told the Daily Beast, the royals handled the abdication crisis by exiling Edward, which meant he and Wallis ultimately came to be seen like unimportant, misguided, disloyal, and even treacherous individuals to almost the entirety of the British people. It was a masterful operation, in the service of which the Queen Mother in particular worked tirelessly. The same thing is already happening with Harry and Harry's wife, and will only gather pace over the next few years under the rule of King Charles. And of course, a wayward second son is far less of an existential threat to the fabric of the monarchy than a wayward king. Of course, to be likened to Wallis and Edward is not a flattering comparison and is challenge fuel, and if Harry's wife were made aware of that, and undoubtedly she will be, as it's not the first time that it's been mentioned, that will threaten her sense of control and annoy her. Furthermore, it demonstrates, if the article is accurate, that King Charles has them very much in his sights, and, of course, their behaviour is a threat to his own need for control, and that he will assert that control over them directly by essentially causing banishment. The article continues. Another source, a former Buckingham Palace staffer, told the Daily Beast that King Charles' accession statement, in which he encouraged his son and Harry's wife to continue to build their lives overseas, challenge fuel, was an undisguised message to them to not disrupt his reign by making frequent trips to the United Kingdom. Assertion of control by Charles. Harry and Harry's wife will get an invite to the coronation, but they will be firmly seated in the cheap seats, challenge fuel, along with Beatrice and Eugenie, as they were at the funeral. So it's going to be second row Harry again. That will be it. Charles will be ruthless when it comes to protecting the crown, and that means keeping Harry and Harry's wife as far from the centre of gravity as possible, the former staffer told the Daily Beast. Of course, that's just somebody's opinion, and they may well be correct about it. Such actions, of course, are challenge fuel, but it has a deeper problem for Harry's wife and Harry. They have nothing to offer. He's a dimwit, and she's the Duchess of Industrial Beige. They have no marketable skills whatsoever, and have just traded upon him having an interest in mental health, and her trying to turn her hand to a multiplicity of things, and failing at them. Of course, Spotify, Netflix, the other organisations that have partnered with them would have no interest in them whatsoever if they were Joe and Jane Ordinary. It's only because they're well known, and they're only well known as a consequence of him being a member of the royal family. The fact that Charles intends to quite rightly distance them from the royal family, prevent them from making frequent trips, means that their currency as non-working royals will plummet even further. Accordingly, that poses a significant problem. That diminishes Harry's wife's ability to assert control through the use of her royal title. It means that she'll have some difficulties in obtaining fuel, but not to the extent of a fuel crisis. She'll still, for instance, be able to get it off old Ginger Bollocks and those in the coterie. It will, of course, impact upon the capacity to obtain character traits, but most importantly, it means that that very important aspect of money which is a residual benefit, will increasingly become harder to come by as a combination of their royal status having less weight, and, of course, as we see as the downward spiral continues, more and more people see through her and will want to have less to do with her. Continuing with the article, the news follows the revelation reported by The Sun Thursday night that Harry snubbed Charles's offer of dinner the night he was at Balmoral following Queen Elizabeth's death, after Charles had forbidden Harry's wife from joining Harry at Balmoral. Assertion of control and wounding. Instead of joining Charles, Camilla and William for supper at Charles's home on the Balmoral estate, Birk Hall, Harry stayed with Prince Andrew, Prince Edward and wife Sophie at Balmoral Castle itself. A source said, Harry was so busy trying to get Harry's wife to Balmoral and rowing with his family that he missed the flight. Charles has an open invitation for Harry to dine with him whenever he is in the country, but Harry was so furious that he refused to eat with his father and brother. It was a massive snub, and he got out of Balmoral at the earliest opportunity to catch the first commercial flight back to London. See parts passing for my analysis of that. Although it was the couple themselves who made the decision to go and live in America, as a consequence of Harry's wife asserting control by withdrawal, they have eyed a transcontinental role for themselves. As they said in their first departure announcement, we now plan to balance our time between the United Kingdom and North America. They were equally open about their desire to continue to represent the monarchy while being able to earn their own money. The plan was rebuffed by the Queen at the so-called Sandringham Summit, where the couple were told that they could have no role in public life as part-time royals. A palace statement at the time said that the Queen had told the couple that in stepping away from the work of the royal family, it is not possible to continue with the responsibilities and duties that come with a life of public service. Makes complete sense. In response, of course, because that was a threat to control, Harry and Harry's wife basically said, "Oh yes we can," issuing a statement that read, "We can all live a life of service. Service is universal." Petulant attempt to nullify the threat to control. While the Queen did not order them to live overseas, as far as is known, the shutdown of travel caused by the pandemic, which struck the world just weeks after they quit the royal family, and the birth of baby Lilibet, essentially parked the question of them travelling back and forth to the United Kingdom for 2 years. Little surprise that Vanity Fair's Katie Nicholl, in her new book, The New Royals, says that William and Kate felt relief when Harry and Harry's wife announced their decision to move to the United States because they felt that the drama was gone. However, the idea, widely assumed, that they had given up the idea of having a significant role in British public life is not accurate. Indeed, Harry has made it explicitly clear in a legal action he's bringing against the British government, seeking automatic police protection when in the United Kingdom, that he still sees the United Kingdom as his home and wants to operate here. This demonstrates, of course, a degree of homesickness on his part and also the sense of entitlement of Harry's wife of having a foot in both camps. In a submission made in January this year, Harry's legal team said, "The United Kingdom will always be Prince Harry's home, and a country he wants his wife and children to be safe in. With the lack of police protection comes too great a personal risk." At a February court hearing, Harry's barrister said it goes without saying that he does want to come back to see family and friends and to continue to support the charities that are so close to his heart. The idea of Harry popping back over every few weeks to do public appearances is likely to give Charles the chills, and of course would amount to a threat to control as a consequence of having the wayward son just bouncing backwards and forwards, and undoubtedly held on the leash by his handler, Harry's wife. So while the decision about Harry's security is, strictly speaking, a matter for the courts, it is probably safe to rule out the establishment pulling any strings to get Harry what he wants. Charles's advisers will be mindful of the fact that when Harry and Harry's wife dropped into the United Kingdom at the beginning of this month, having announced what was supposed to be a 4-day whirlwind tour supporting charities close to their hearts, there goes that phrase once again, it completely dominated royal news feeds for days on end. That trip became the subject of intense irritation at the palace, with insiders annoyed at the couple undertaking engagements that looked indistinguishable from their formal royal duties. Sense of entitlement, lack of boundary recognition, and let's not forget, Harry's wife deems it appropriate to come over the ocean and undertake this false royal tour while not bothering to see her unwell father, and of course neither of them bothering to go and see the Queen, who was of course not in good health either. Returning to the article, then of course the Queen died, meaning that the 4-day excursion became a 2-week epic. The couple finally flew home to their children on Tuesday, September the 20th, having arrived at his thought on Sunday, September the 4th. One reasonable interpretation of Harry's treatment in the days after the Queen's death and at her funeral is that it was part of a strategy of chipping away at Harry's importance, of reframing him in the public eye from being Prince Harry, sixth in line to the throne, to Prince Harry, minor, non-working royal who lives overseas. Ouch. Not only will that annoy him, but it will, of course, be like a scalding burn to Harry's wife, because, of course, the diminution in status of Harry reflects on her, as Harry is an extension of her. If Harry and Harry's wife had sought to blur the lines via charitable commitments between their present identity as private citizens and their former identity as royals, the last 2 weeks offered the palace an unprecedented opportunity to render them again in sharp relief. The most explicit illustration of this was in the seating arrangements at the Queen's funeral, which, humiliatingly, denied Harry a front row seat in favour of his cousins, Peter and Zara Phillips. Again, by extension, that would wound Harry's wife. Palace sources have insisted that the seating was decided purely in order of age, and there was no snub involved. Harry's expression and his reluctance to say "God save the King" suggested that he saw things otherwise, undoubtedly having a ginger tantrum, understanding all too well that for the second son of the king to be second-rowed in favour of his cousins on the basis of his age was, if not a snub, certainly a massive recalibration of the royal pecking order, which traditionally has accorded privilege on the order of precedence. Harry, of course, being led by his pecker, hasn't thought this through, and thought, because of the poison poured in his ear by his wife, that the royal family would continue to welcome them and they could go and earn their money elsewhere. And he didn't bank upon or realise that the response, of course, is, well, when you're out, you're out. We still care and love about you, but don't expect any favours or privilege because you're a non-working royal now. Returning to the article, this was just one final reminder of Harry's new lowly outsider status. The tone was set on the day of the Queen's death, when no seat was found for Harry on the military jet that conveyed William, Andrew and Edward to the Queen's deathbed in Scotland, with Harry instead being forced to take a privately chartered prop plane from a civilian airport, Luton, over an hour from London, and being told of his grandmother's death just 5 minutes before the world at large was informed. And either not being invited to dine with Charles, or, as the Sun reports, refusing, Harry left Balmoral early to fly home on a scheduled BA service. He was subsequently ordered not to wear uniform for any of the ceremonial events, before Charles highlighted the fact that it was completely in his gift to allow him to wear uniform, had he been so minded, by ordering Harry to wear uniform during his vigil for the Queen. Again, this is Charles flexing and asserting his control over his wayward son, and effectively is pulling his pants down and administering some smacks to the pink bottom of the Prince of Pink Pancakes, letting him know, "I'm Charles in charge now, and I'll put you across my knee any time I see fit," which, of course, is an assertion of control over his son as a non-intimate secondary source. This also, of course, impacts upon Harry's wife. Thinking that she'd got the golden ticket by marrying Prince Harry, she's now finding, of course, that gold actually might well be fool's gold instead, because he is being given an abject lesson in his new lowly status, which then impacts upon her, both in terms of Harry being an extension of her, and the fact that it reduces the opportunities for her to leverage the royal status. Prior to the Queen's death, tempers had been stirred by Harry's wife's inflammatory interview with The Cut, in which she implicitly threatened to release more secrets about her time in the royal family. Use of threat and see parts passing for my analysis. However, there is a perception in the palace that Harry's wife's attacks on the monarchy can be shrugged off, and that they are failing to cut through. The all-important British audience appears to have largely decided she is not credible, principally due to the fact that she has made some bizarre claims in interviews, such as her inexplicable comment, "It's not inexplicable, I've explained it," comparing her wedding to the freeing of Nelson Mandela, which the British media have then jumped on and made a huge show of forensically pulling apart, which is the problem that Harry's wife has. Because she's not a more evolved type of narcissist, her narcissism causes her to tell porcupines, thinking that they are effective in the moment, and then there's the collateral consequence of them making her look like a right moron. Harry represents an entirely different level of threat. there is genuine nervousness about the impact his memoir, now thought to be delayed in the wake of the Queen's death, but that has not been confirmed, could have on the King if he decides to launch a serious attack on Charles, which many insiders fear he will. One explanation for the relentless messaging over the past 2 weeks that Harry is now firmly outside the royal club, and so are his offspring, could be that it is to undermine Harry's status as the ultimate insider before the buck comes out. King Charles's office declined to comment on the claims made in this piece when contacted by the Daily Beast. While there is no reason to doubt on a personal level the unofficial line from the palace that Charles loves Harry and wishes nothing more than to be reconciled with his son, the personal will now become a distant second to Charles' top priority, preserving the crown. Harry and Harry's wife are a huge distraction that the royals don't need. Charles wants them out of sight and out of mind. So he is likely to feel far more comfortable if Harry and his wife, Harry's wife, are safely on the other side of the world, forever and ever. Amen. This article, if accurate, makes it quite clear that Harry is hurtling towards almost persona non grata status, which of course impacts heavily on Harry's wife, and that Charles will firmly see himself as in charge and isn't going to fuck around dealing with these two. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.